let me know.
Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everyone. I will call to order the Monday, December 11th, 2023 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. Before I begin, are there any public comments on items not on the agenda? Anybody online? Okay, all right, we'll start the regular session. First item on the agenda, sorry, it's been a while. Chair Stoll is absent today. I'm going to be doing my best to fill in. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Here.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner Espy?
Here.
Commissioner Staggs?
Here.
Commissioner Laws?
Here.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
I am here. All right. Okay. Yeah, I did that kind of out of order. All right, moving on. First item on the agenda, meeting minutes approval. Who is introducing this? Is there an introduction, or are we going to just ask if we've reviewed them? Any questions, anything to discuss?
Correct. You can just move forward with a motion.
Okay.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Got a second by Commissioner LaSalle. We have a motion by Commissioner Espy. Can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner LaSalle?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye. Is it me or is the audio in here different? Sounds a little better. Anybody notice that?
Say that again?
I feel the audio sounds better. Is it? Okay.
I caught it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds
I
better.
think
feeling
City
it.
Recorder Jacob Wiley's been working pretty hard to improve the audio.
Okay.
I have to try those.
All right. Now, on the agenda, I'm seeing the public comment was after meeting minutes. Is there a reason they put it down there?
That's just for any comments that aren't on the agenda.
Okay. Normally we do that first. I was just wondering why they put that after the first agenda item. I don't think I've seen that. It's confusing to me. All right. No problem. Second item on the agenda, GLUA 23-000033, LEG 23-00002, adopt the Oregon City Loop Trail Refinement Plan into the Oregon City Transportation System Plan and an ancillary document to the comprehensive plan. And I believe this is going to be heard as a legislative hearing?
That's
So-
correct, yeah.
Okay, so then it'll be the legislative script. Almost at the point where I need glasses. Okay. The following is a public hearing on the legislative application is scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply to the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws and codes. Legislative actions involve the adoption of or amendment of the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, maps, inventories, and other policy documents that affect the entire city or large portions of it. Legislative actions which affect land use shall begin with a public hearing before the Planning Commission. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission on a legislative action, the City Commission shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposal. Any interested person may provide written or oral testimony on the proposal at or prior to the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, the City Commission may adopt, modify, or reject the legislative proposal, or it may remand the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration. If the decision is to adopt or at least some form of the proposal and therefore amend the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, official zoning maps, or some component of any of these documents, the City Commission decision shall be enacted as an ordinance. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open at each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a pertinent person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in the oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they're not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person writing a continuance to present, any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. Before we begin the hearing, members of the planning, I need to read this. Members of the Planning Commission are being biased. As a result, I'll call on each commissioner to disclose any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. At this point, does any commissioner have any conflicts of interest? I'll start just to my left with Commissioner Espy.
No conflicts or bias.
All right. Commissioner Laws,
No conflicts or bias.
Commissioner West,
No conflict of interest or bias.
Commissioner Staggs,
I have no conflicts of interest or bias.
and Commissioner LaSalle.
No bias or conflict of interest.
Thank you. And for myself, no bias or conflicts of interest. All right. I guess with that, we will commence with the staff report for legislative file, 23-00002, adopt the Oregon City Loop Trail Refinement Plan and Oregon City Transportation System Plan as an auxiliary document to the comprehensive plan. And I believe this is Mr. Wheeler, Christina
Vice
Robertson
Chair
Gardner.
Schlagenhofer, I'm going to, Planning Commission, I'm going to provide a couple slides for overview.
Thank you.
About process, and I'll hand it over to our Assistant City Engineer, Josh Wheeler. Hey. All right. So your role this evening is to conduct the first public hearing of a legislative comprehensive plan amendment, and the transportation system plan is an ancillary document, so this goes through the legislative process. You're going to be making a recommendation to the City Commission in your motion, and the Planning Commission will vote on the motion. The Planning Commission will vote on a motion to make a recommendation to the City Commission. Next slide. Thank you. So as described so very well by Vice Chair Schlagenhofer, this is a legislative type 4 process, which means the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Commission, who then holds their own public hearings and chooses to adopt or amend or not adopt whatever the proposal is. You made your disclosures. As part of a legislative process, you can have ex parte communications. So you can have conversations with the public about this because this is a legislative file. This is policy related rather than a quasi-judicial land use, which is a proposed land use action. But that's where you put your judge hat on. This, now you get to put your legislator hat on, your quasi-judicial role. The public comment, we've received no public comment to date as part of the land use action of the legislative file, but Josh Wheeler is here to speak to the public outreach they did during the plan creation. Oops. So in plain speak, what is the proposal? It is the Oregon City Loop Trail Refinement Plan analyzes existing conditions and provides direction for future development funding and needs for several segments in the previously adopted loop trail. So in our existing transportation system plan, we have a concept of a loop trail, and that loop trail goes outside of the city limits and envisions long-term coordination with the county and other parties. But there were 4 segments inside the city limits that really did not have a lot of additional detail. They really were a project number and a line on a map. And so Josh and his team worked with a consultant to provide additional details. Why do you need those details? Really for 2 main reasons. Applying for future grants, granting entities are going to want more information than a line on a map and a TSP project number. And as we move forward, if there are any abutting projects that go through land use that may be impacted, we as a city would want to have additional details. So if we look at conditions of approval for them to proportionally build a portion of it, if it is on their property, we need that additional detail. And that is why you put these refinement plans into things like the Parks Master Plan or Transportation System Plan or Trails Master Plan, because it provides ability for the city to build either through a land use action, if it's applicable, or through future grants. And so that is kind of why it goes through you as a planning commission, because you are the first hearing on its way to adoption. So the big picture, which I actually really like, this came from the plan, flat out said, local governments should plan public services in accordance with the community needs and as a whole, rather than being forced to respond to individual development proposals. So if we have a plan, we adopt it, we go through a public process, we engage the community, and then when actual development happens, we aren't just responding to individual development as they come in. So the adoption of the plan, as I said, the last remaining segments are what you are seeing here. And the green line that goes all around the city is the concept of the loop trail. The segments that Josh will be presenting today are inside the city limits and were those segments I talked about that were really just lines on a map, but it provided the city no additional detail. One thing that the Planning Commission did approve, and the City Commission approved a couple years ago, was the Oregon City Kenema portion of the loop trail. And so that was another example where this project went through a public outreach, went through a design process, and really looked at more details of how you got people on that north edge of the loop trail between kind of the promenade through Kenema. So that is an example of a segment of the loop trail that went through its own refinement plan. So what the Public Works Department and Josh and his team really looked at is where are the other holes that we just haven't provided that level of detail. So we have criteria for adoption and approval, and these are Chapter 17.68 whenever we do zone changes or comprehensive plan amendments, as well as looking at our new Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, our policies and strategies. So in the staff report, you see both the applicant's findings and staff's findings related to how this proposal meets the various goals and strategies of the comprehensive plan, as well as our criteria for approval. And some of the main points really came down to the more we can provide ways for people to make short trips throughout our city that don't involve vehicles. So encouraging people to bike or walk between neighbors, maybe that short trip to a commercial center, the more we can reduce our vehicle miles traveled as a city, the healthier we'll be as a city, and the more kind of connected we can be. These loop trails really are a way to interact within our kind of sub-neighborhoods on a pedestrian and bike level. This is not really a commuting, this is not really looking at, how do we get to my job downtown? This is really like, how do I get to my friend's house and I don't have to get in my car? So in general, staff found that this proposal meets the criteria and the goals and policies of our comprehensive plan and our chapter 17.68. So the options you have this evening after hearing the presentation from Josh Wheeler and asking questions both to myself and Josh, is you can recommend approval to the City Commission for this file. We'll be adding it to the next available City Commission meeting, which would be probably in mid-January. You could request additional information to staff and continue this file to January 8th or continue it to a different date certain. Kind of the ball's in your court for next steps, but at some point you'll need to present a recommendation to the City Commission. So with that, I'm going to hand over my presentation. I'll have Josh present, and then you can ask questions to both of us. I'm probably more process-oriented, and Josh is probably more content-oriented.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission members and Vice Chair Schlagenhofer. My name is Josh Wheeler. I'm with the Public Works Department of Oregon City, title of Assistant City Engineer, and I was the project manager on this project. As Christina said, the purpose of this plan was to get more details of how we would build out a portion of the loop trail as shown in the Trails Master Plan and the Transportation System Plan, or TSP. So the Trails Master Plan is a plan that is managed by the Parks Department, but many of those regional type paths are implemented by the Public Works Department. Those are implemented one of two ways. They are implemented by either private development being required to do it because it goes along or through a private development area, or is done by a capital improvement project or CIP project by the Public Works Department, typically done after receiving a grant. We normally do not have the amount of funds to do those outright. We're usually seeking grant funds to be able to do those types of projects. One thing Christina said about the process, you may have recall a couple years ago, we did the Park Place Urbanization Plan, which was to determine how to urbanize the streets or which ones we should remain rural in nature in the Park Place neighborhood. This is very similar. It's a way to refine what's there to something more specific so that we know how to build it out in the future. So one thing I'm going to do with my presentation is show you some slides, but also hit some highlights of the application. So the first thing that you see here on the slide is 4 segments, S22, S23, S24, and S30. And if you recall from a few slides ago from Christina, you'll notice that 2 of those are fully part of the loop trail, but 2 of them are actually ancillary to the loop trail, but convey people to that loop. And so the ones that convey people to the loop are S22 Claremont and S24 Gaffney. Gaffney is an existing path that goes from Gaffney Lane out to the rear of Gaffney Elementary School. And then the Claremont version, S22, goes all the way from Beaver Creek Road through the shopping center to Malala, along Claremont Road, and then behind the school, ultimately all the way to Myers. So that would convey people all the way to the loop trail so that if they want to recreate using the loop trail and have a whole loop of the system once it's all built out in all of its phases, or if they want to connect to other regional trails, whether it be the one that's along I-205 or others that get you to other parts of the county, other areas of the metropolitan area, that's another benefit of the loop trail. As Christina said, there is this overall plan for the loop trail. I would say about half of it is outside the city limits right now, and much of it lies on Metro land. And so one thing we did as part of this process was talk to Metro and say, what's the likelihood that you're going to be doing your parts anytime in the future? Their response to us was that it is in their plans, there is no timeline, but it's not something that is unknown to them. So that was positive. As Christina said, the McLoughlin to Kanema portion of the plan has already been refined, and we have a plan for that we have once sought out grant funding for. Was not successful, but I'm sure the next time we find another opportunity, we will try and seek that again. And so really, there are other portions that have been built. A few of those sections are near what was the Parker Knoll subdivision, which goes through Wesley Lynn Park or along Wesley Lynn Park. That portion has already been built. And it would connect part of a couple of these sections, S30 of Orchard Grove and S23 of Myers. Another section that you'll know was built is the part that is along the new Myers Road. That gets you over to Beaver Creek. It also gets you to some other trails that go through the Clackamas Community College. That trail is part of the whole system. It ultimately gets you over to the intersection of Maple Lane and Beaver Creek. And there's current development going on where a portion of the loop trail is going through that development as well. And then it will hit the Metro property, which will be on Metro likely in the future. And so there are portions that have been built. So this is not one of those plans that feels like it gets put on a shelf and doesn't get implemented. But without the plan, we won't be able to implement portions in the future because it will not be specific enough. So these specifics are really what we needed. That slide is a little small for these screens, but what we did with community outreach is we had two major ways we had outreach. One was an online survey that we had from September 9th to October 3rd, where we had 70 responses. Another was an in-person workshop on October 10th. Now, this happened in 2022, by the way. It was held at Gaffney Lane Elementary. We had 24 attendees from the people who really backed up to the section along Claremont. They were the ones that we were kind of targeting to have that discussion in that meeting. We also had representatives on stakeholder interviews that we did with our consultant, which included Clackamas Community College, Deering Property Management, who manages the shopping center between Beaver Creek and Malala, the Gaffney Lane Neighborhood Association itself, Oregon City Parks Department, Portland General Electric. As you'll know, along the Claremont section, there's a lot of overhead lines, so we had to figure out what our constraints were there. Metro, as I talked about, Oregon City School District, we also had a representative of ODOT show up at our pre-application meeting, which was a requirement before we had this legislative file. And they just wanted to ensure that whenever we built the section that would end at Myers and 213, that they were consulted during that process, which they would be. We also sent out postcards to anyone that was directly adjacent to the four portions of these trails. So all the portions along Myers, the portions along Orchard Grove, Claremont, we gave postcards to all those saying, we're doing this trail, we want to let you know about this survey, we want any comments that you have. And so we posted also on social media and had a website, which is still currently up and running, where people could find out more about this project. Before I go into some of the details of the cross sections, I just want to go over a few things in the application. There are four main points that needed to be met to meet the requirements of this legislative file. One was to talk about the plan implementation process. As Christina said, this is a special purpose plan that is part of the city's transportation plan. And the way we adopt it is ancillary to that transportation plan, but also ancillary to the comprehensive plan, which is what brings us to this meeting. We needed to show that we had an adequacy of the plan to guide land use actions and include an examination of the trends. And this plan provides that analysis of the existing conditions and provides direction for that future development funding and the needs for these types of paths. We needed to see if this still reflects the community needs and desires. We did that through our community meetings and our survey. We had many people that were very interested in the plan, interested in what it would ultimately become. We had some a little reserved about it, and so we worked through those various reservations. We did not go through all the details at the time because that would be done during the detailed design development of the project. But this plan will inform those so that when we design, we will know what things to attempt to avoid where possible so that it's not negatively impactful to any of those directly adjacent properties. And then fourthly, we needed to show that this was an appropriate plan for regional, state, and federal reasons, and we've given all the information, and in addition, we've also looked at environmental impacts and electrical easements, which also make sure that we are not impacting anything environmentally that is regulated by the state or regulated by the electric companies with respect to their towers along Claremont. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to say there. Yeah, the rest of the application just says how we meet the various comprehensive plan policies, and Christina has said that staff, planning staff has made a recommendation recommends to approve the plan because they feel that we have met those various criteria. So what I want to leave you with is a few slides that show you more specifically what this plan is showing. This is an example on your screens of Project S24. Project S24 is part of the Gaffney Elementary section. If you know Gaffney Elementary, there's a, what I like to call a goat path there right now. There's a path that people have walked for many years. This would make that a concrete permanent path. Actually, probably not concrete, probably asphalt, but a solid path. It would widen and pave that existing path. It would use the space between the school and the residential homes. We would use or let fencing remain as needed. And it would enhance that connection to get people out to the trail as well as students over to their school once all this was built. S22 is the Claremont section. The upper picture is showing you through the retail parking lot. That is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it that's talked about in the plan is to go around the parking lot on the existing bike lanes on McLoughlin and Beaver Creek, or the existing sidewalks if you're choosing to walk. The section that would be west of McLoughlin along Claremont, we would bring that path as close to the roadway as possible to try and prevent it from being directly under the power lines. That was a concern of the city commission. One thing I didn't mention during our community engagement part was we've done a work session in front of the city commission to make sure that we were where they thought we needed to be before we came and went through the adoption process. And so one of their concerns was don't place that path directly under there, try and keep it, away from there as reasonable as you can. And so that's why we're showing it as we are there. The long-term vision would create that path going all the way from Beaver Creek to and through Frontier Parkway, which would get someone to Myers. S23, this one's kind of interesting, and it's a little bit difficult to explain. What you're seeing here on the top picture is the existing cross-section of Myers Road from generally Leland all the way to 213. You have one lane of traffic going in each direction. You have sidewalks on both sides. You have most of the way, not all the way, and you have bike lanes on both sides. What we would do is create a true path that would be 12 feet wide where the bike and the pedestrian would share that path. And that would be on the left-hand side there that you see. And we would take the bike lanes off of the road, put them on that bike path, and then the pedestrians would be on the path on one side and on the existing sidewalk on the other. And so the road would actually shift in its alignment slightly so that we could accommodate all the different pieces. We wouldn't need to rebuild the road. We would just have to create a new geometry of what's there. And then lastly, S30, which is the Orchard Grove area. There's a piece of undeveloped property up there, which could look like this here, with houses on both sides. It is zoned for housing. And this would be regular sidewalks with shared bike lanes on there. We do not anticipate or propose that a separate path would go through here. That wouldn't make sense for the way that property would develop. In fact, one thing to know is that the Oregon City Loop Trail and many of our trails in our Trails Master Plan, as well as any trail plans in the TSP, are not always intended to be separated trails. We try and do those whenever possible, whenever the land allows and the availability is there. But when that's not available or it doesn't make sense for the situation, that trail is on sidewalks for pedestrians and on the road for either separated bike lanes or sharrows, as you see in this example, of bikes traveling with traffic. And so this wouldn't be anticipated to be one of those types of sections. And I believe with that, that is all I have. So I'll bring you back to your options, but Christina and I are here for any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right. In no particular order, I'm sure we have a lot of questions, so who would like to start? All right, Commissioner LaSalle?
I've got several here. You said it's going to be added to the TSP. Will these be added as a bike ped or shared use or family or a variety of designations?
So the plan is adopted ancillary to the TSP, which means those TSP projects which are already there, which are S22, S24, S23, and S30, they're already designated. This plan is adopted as part of the TSP to show that as you implement the TSP, you should not only look at these lines on a paper, but you should also look at these detailed designs in this study. So we're not creating new paths, we are adopting a plan that gives you detail to those paths.
So then my next question, I guess, already answered, would they be listed as likely or unlikely to be funded? Those would be paired up with the existing projects?
Their priority would not change. The way they're listed is how they would remain.
What is, in your opinion, the likelihood of getting funding for these paths?
I can only give an opinion answer on that. I can't give a factual answer on that. What I can tell you is bike path grants are pretty competitive. We found that when we tried to seek a grant for the McLoughlin-Kanema Trail. They're also very specific in wanting to ensure that those paths are off the right-of-way. So I think this would be more successful for something like Claremont. It was less successful for McLoughlin because it was using part of the road. I think all the others also would use part of the road. So I think one of our sections have a lot of potential for that. But it also has a lot of conflicts with electric and property owner coordination that will be needed. So likelihood, I think it's something we're going to keep our eyes out on now that we have this plan, and we'll be applying for funding when the opportunities come up. And we'll probably be seeking Claremont first, unless for some reason we find a new opportunity elsewhere.
S23 was Myers Road.
Yes.
Did you build the Myers Road extension as shown on your slide to accommodate the trails?
Yes, the Myers Road extension was built in such a way to accommodate all items within the TSP.
Okay. And let's see here. My last one, just a statement. It seems like the loop trail will be kind of a moving target as the city expands. Am I thinking right or wrong?
Well, I think the intent is that not to create a trail that, well, I mean, one thing about these trails, these things like the Trails Master Plan are very aspirational. You know, there's a big idea that in 50 to 100 years is really what you're talking about, that you're going to connect your whole system. And I think one interesting thing about the Trails Master Plan, I actually forget the date of this. I wonder if I can see it on here. 2003. So the Trails Master Plan, the last update was 2003. So 20 years ago, we have a plan, and since that time, we have built a couple small sections. So it shows you how long it takes to build something like this out. The other thing is we have had no major annexations since, I believe, 2005. I think 2005, from some other research I was doing on another project, was when we did a lot of the western Central Point area. And then, yes, we've done some things with the Thimble Creek area and some things over at Park Place with annexations, but those were already part of the UGB. So the UGB has not moved for quite a while, and it probably will be quite a while more before it moves again. So I think it makes sense for what Oregon City is 20 years ago, today, and 20 years from now. This makes a lot of sense, and it is a good aspiration to have.
That's all I had, thank you.
Okay, who's next? Commissioner Espy.
I have a couple. Well, how many miles is the trail?
That is a good question. I do not know that answer.
Okay. And then I was also wondering if the city charter was considered and if the trail was planned for any areas that are charter parks or any kind of conflicts there.
So the 4 sections here would not go through any of the city's charter parks. We actually had parks involved in this plan because there is park land involved,
Yeah.
but not charter park land involved. And so that's not a criteria for this one.
So to follow up then, on would any aspect of the Parks Master Plan need to be amended to accommodate for the trails that are being considered in the TSP?
No, because it's not going through any city parks. Yeah, and for example, I'll just give you one example. The property along Claremont is kind of jointly maintained, and I forget exactly who owns what. The city owns it, so a department never owns land, but the city owns a lot of that land on the south side of Claremont, and Parks and Public Works share the maintenance of the land, and they use it for stockpiles and things like that. That's where we would have to coordinate with Parks to make sure that they still have usable area for their operations, but it's not park land. It's land used by Parks, owned by the city.
Okay, and then,
Actually,
yeah.
to add the planning lens to that, we did not recommend a needed amendment to the Trails Master Plan, which is part of the parks.
Right.
Because this is not amending really the loop trail. Loop trail is, these are providing the transportation system plan previously identified segments with more detail. So you weren't amending the loop trail. The loop trail is still the loop trail as part of the parks.
Right.
But this is really just taking what's already in the transportation system plan. And one thing that the TSP in 2013 did, which I thought was really great, is it really combined the cross goals of the Trails Master Plan and Parks with the actual implementation, leverage that the TSP can do. Mm-hmm. And so, when I was working with the Parks Department, kind of between 2001 and 2013, it was complicated. It was hard. How do you get the dedication you need to meet and implement that Parks Trails Plan? And it was hard. And once we married it with the Transportation System Plan, it got so much easier.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
And
good.
so that would be, one of the things I wish we would have married our 2 plans earlier, because I don't think we've really been able to, through land use, be able to get the level of implementation we want until
Yeah.
we worked across.
That's what I was hoping, yeah,
cross-adopt.
that there'd be reciprocity between the two.
So
And then
yeah, there's a reason we're not amending the Trails Master Plan, because this refinement doesn't affect it. This is just refining what's
Okay.
already in the TSP.
Okay. And then the sewer master plan, are any parts of could any parts of the trail serve as maintenance roadways for existing sewers?
I don't fully understand the question.
So in other words, sometimes, the city will put in a sewer and they won't have a road to access it and maintain it. So I was just wondering if the trail could serve as a dual purpose in some cases.
It's not something that we looked at, and the only place that may occur is behind Gaffney, but I can't recall if there's a sewer back there or not at this time.
I mean, there just might be an opportunity.
Yeah,
I'm not saying.
for sure.
And then one more thing. Those look like sections that you guys have planned for standard kind of build out for different trail sections like the cement and I was just wondering if you guys considered using asphalt since it's cheaper and you might be able to make the dollar stretch a little bit further using an asphalt pathway as opposed to a cement pathway.
Yeah, I misspoke when I said concrete earlier. I meant asphalt.
Okay.
So actually, the Trails Master Plan details the likely material and items, because it even talks about trails that go through woods and that they can be things like mulch and things like that. But these type of parts of the trails would be a more urban style with a paved, typically asphalt. So yeah, that would be our expectation at this time.
Great.
Yeah, that's a really good piece. The loop trail, the Trails Loop Trail, the Parks Loop Trail anticipates many different types of trails that would make up the loop. So if you're going through a Metro Open Space, you probably were working with the Metro Open Space Trails Plan material and function. If you are on a city street, you probably are working with a city street function, maybe with asphalt, very concrete. If you're going through a park, you may work with what Parks uses their material. So this is really about stitching together all the different land uses and what kind of materials they would anticipate.
Yeah, I think you'd want to have, specific development standards or building standards for trails that are going to go through private property, so that when you have those exactions, that the private property owner would know, have a level of certainty on what they are up against when they have to construct the trail.
Absolutely.
And that guidance does already exist within the Trails Master Plan.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
I looked up the Trails Master Plan, and it says that there are 9.5 miles of Oregon City Loop Trail.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Almost 10, okay.
Okay, more questions? Commissioner Staggs.
Okay, I got a list here. Is there a map showing what part of the trail is already built?
We did not provide that, but the portions that are built are generally the portion through and near Wesley Lynn Park, the portion that goes through or around Clackamas Community College, and then there's a portion currently under construction over off of Maple Lane Road. And then you could also say that much of our downtown area, which is part of the loop trail, already has either separated bike lanes or intentions for bikes to join cars in their lanes.
It'd be really helpful to, we have the green line that goes around the city. It'd be really helpful to have a map that showed how much of the trail we've actually accomplished, since we started looking at this, whenever it was, 20 plus years ago. And then the next question I had was, in the map showing S22, S23, S24, and S30, which is what we're talking about tonight, right?
Correct.
It looks like S23 is part of the larger trail that goes around the whole city. S30 looks like it's part of a trail that kind of branches off the main trail and goes through the neighborhood based on the map here I'm looking at. But S22 and S24 don't look like they're part of the larger trail around the city. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so what we were trying to do with this refinement plan was create a big enough plan that it wasn't too small in its scope, where it did not have as big of a benefit as we were looking for. And so when we asked the question, we want to refine these trail areas and we want to do it in relation to the Oregon City Loop Trail, we found that very easily S23 was directly part of the loop trail. S30, depending on which map you look at, I know there was one that you saw there with Christina that showed a little further out. There's another one that I've drawn up that shows that it's actually part of it. So that's more of a, where's the line on the piece of paper question. So S30, I would say, is really truly part of it, or at least in the same area as the intention is. The reason we added S22 and S24 was because we felt that they were so beneficial to the overall loop trail that it got people from the middle of the area, that Malala Beaver Creek area, over to the actual loop, and got people from the college up into that area, got people from schools to the school, away from the school, around, that it was beneficial to add those into this. And so while we call it the Oregon City Loop Trail Refinement Plan, we fully understand that two of those are not directly part of the trail, but we feel they were strongly indirectly connected. And so we thought it made sense from a scoping perspective to add those in.
Right, okay, got it. Yeah, I'm generally, I don't think we can have enough trails, personally. And is the planning department, and I apologize for my naiveness on this, but is the planning department involved directly in collaborating with the engineering department on the trails in general? Are you guys collaborating with each other on this?
Well, the trails have already been adopted, so this was really working with our consultant team on the design. So, we went through the transportation system plan in 2013 and worked on identifying these trail segments. So this is just the refinement piece.
Okay. And then are we looking at, just generally speaking, with the trail designs in terms of, where things are located, heights of fences, the widths of everything? Are those kind of standards that we're looking at from other examples where it's already been done generally? Yeah,
so the Trails Master Plan tells you in about, I'm trying to remember, it feels like about 8 different scenarios, whether it's rural, whether it's urban, whether it's through a woods, whether it's through an urban area, should it be 10 feet, 12 feet, 8 feet, what material? That's all in the Trails Master Plan, which actually we used to inform this plan.
Gotcha.
And really the intent here was to say at what exact location, rather than a line on a plan, can this be built and should this be built? And so, for example, the Claremont section is one of those that we said, should we have on-street bike lanes only? Do we need to have a separated path? If we have a separated path, should it be up against the residential areas? Should it be up against the schools? Should it be in the middle? We looked at all those different scenarios during the process.
Yeah.
On Myers, a similar thing. You saw what we ultimately came up with. That was actually probably our most complex to look at. And that one was, should we keep it as is? Should we move it to a path? Should it be on the, depending on what part of Myers you're on, the south side or the north side, or if you want to call that east or west. But we went through all those scenarios, and based on the engineering, based on environmental impacts, based on community input, that's where we landed on those sections.
Right, great, okay. Just as this has nothing, this is an acoustics in the room comment, really quick. Well, I noticed that when the people on those sides speak, it's harder to hear, but when he speaks there, it's easier. Anyways, just a quick side note on that, maybe. In the ongoing saga of fixing the acoustics of the room.
I also tend to be a really loud speaker anyway, though.
And I tend to be soft, so there we go.
questions? All right, Commissioner Laws.
Okay, I got a list here. Number one, plans on maintenance in terms of it in the future. Obviously some neighborhoods will be eventually built around it. Will they also contribute, whoever the developers are, to the trail, eventually long-term maintenance or improvements? And then I got other questions after that, so.
Okay. Well, the answer is probably everyone's favorite answer. It depends. In those 4 instances, the Gaffney Lane section, we would work with the school district and come up with a plan, whether we take care of it or whether the school district take care of it. With the one that goes behind the school and along Claremont, that would very likely be the Public Works Department that would take care of that. There's always ongoing discussions about should trails be a parks maintenance or Public Works be a maintenance, and it tends to be, if it's in a right-of-way or an easement, it tends to be Public Works, and if it's on parkland, it tends to be parks. With respect to the Myers section, part of the right-of-way, trails most of the time, and there's a little asterisk to that, are maintained by Public Works in the right-of-way, where the sidewalks are maintained by the adjacent property owner. There are cases where the paths are also maintained by the adjacent property owner when they're part of a subdivision, and that would be the case actually for the Orchard Grove section, that in that case, there's not a separated path, and so the sidewalks as per city code would be maintained by the adjacent property owners, and the roadway itself, which includes bike lanes, would be maintained by the city. So each one is dependent, but we would know that well ahead of time of who's taking care of what once it's built.
The next question is in terms of safety, accessibility for police officers, and then also, and I hate putting these two together, but sometimes they're separate and sometimes they're together, homelessness, because obviously certain parts of those trails will attract more people to possibly camp. So what is the plan for that?
So those 3 topics did come up during our outreach portions. There are a lot of different solutions to mitigate those issues. Anything from fencing to shrubbery to signage to bollards to keep the right type of traffic on there. We don't want cars on there. Those would be determined during the detailed design, and we would work with the adjacent community members. We would work with the police department, fire department, including as well, to make sure that we don't make it an inviting place for the wrong type of people that would not be benefited by this path from what our intent for this path is, but would be open and not feel constrained to those. So you end up with the issue of if you do too much fencing, you start creating a tunnel that's uninviting, and quite often can be out of sight, out of mind all of a sudden. And so we have to put all that into context when we're doing our design, and that's what would be required during that process.
Sounds good. And then the other thing would be, and I'm going to put these together here, is how to keep it clean in terms of maintenance, because obviously we know maybe even neighbors or someone will go through there and dump or possibly just litter along, because that's what sometimes people do. And how do we keep it clean in terms of appealing for our city? And then also looking at trees and native plants, there's an opportunity for that as well. And maybe the other thing I was just thinking about is obviously if there's some wetland areas to create some type of maybe French drain or something that's kind of appealing. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, so landscaping is something that would be considered. We always try and use the planning department's tree list, native plant list, whenever we're doing anything. And we always try and make things as native as possible. With respect to, what was the first part of that question?
The first part was just overall in terms of...
Cleanliness, like litter and dumping and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I would suggest, although not being the Public Works Director, I can't directly answer that, but with my experience within my department, our resources do only go so far. So with things such as does a street need swept that we haven't been to for some time? Or is a street light out? Or is a sign knocked down? Actually, a lot of those questions actually come through my desk and then get forwarded to the appropriate people. That would probably be how we would find out about some of these trails that may have an illegal dump or something. And we would put it on our list to do as soon as humanly possible, but we would probably find out by way of a citizen.
Okay. And then the last question, and, we have this youth council. It sounds like a lot of what they've been addressing are social issues in terms of equity and inclusion. Is there some way to involve this youth council possibly and get them into some planning and some work in terms of being involved in some way of this project in some kind?
That's something we would be open to. We'd probably be more open to it at this time as part of the design process in the future. And I don't know how the youth council is interacting with the various planning requirements in any way.
Yeah, with our new council, but getting up and going, I know they've been working really hard with their mental health fair this fall. And I know, for example, another project that we'll be working on that's a refinement to the transportation system plan is the McLoughlin Boulevard enhancements. And we do actually hope to reach out to the youth council for that. This, unfortunately, this is a project that's kind of completed before the youth council was started, but as we get into, construction or working on landscaping or really the next time there's a public outreach, I think the goal is to bring the youth council in as basically as one of the many boards and commissions that you would reach out to.
Oh, one other question as well. Certain sections of it, obviously, there's a lot of history in Oregon City in terms of families or significant areas, like we just looked at Hazeldale Park and the history of that. Is there an opportunity to kind of acknowledge little spots of it that are significant with a little sign or something that attract people to maybe want to walk it even more, or like maybe talking to little local historians about noting some factual little facts on a certain area?
Absolutely. I mean, we'd have no problem with doing that, doing some outreach for that. What we try and do, and one thing we've heard, I'll toot our horn for a little tangent. We've heard from the city manager that he's getting fewer complaints about our capital improvement projects, that our public outreach is more expansive than it used to be. And so that's a good thing. And that's something you would see with this project is we would send letters or postcards out to all directly impacted areas when we're under design. We'd also probably make some type of post on a social media saying, hey, if anyone has any, comments or questions, please let us know. That's the kind of thing we've been doing with projects more often lately. And so that's probably what you'll see more going forward. And we hope that people get interested and get involved.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you for those questions. Commissioner West, do you have anything to ask?
I don't have anything to add. You answered one.
All right, I do have some things. I've been trying to keep up with my notes because a lot of things have been answered. I guess the one that really is left, and I know it may not have a lot to do with the refinement that we're talking about tonight, but it's just something that I've been thinking about. And it refers to public land, not city-owned land. So let's say there's a private property. Let's say it's vacant, maybe it's a farm, okay? But there's a line going through it. So what does that mean for that property? Will there be an easement that is required in there? Is there going to be something in the deed as far as a deed restriction when somebody goes to develop it? What if the guy never develops it, it just stays a farm? Will he at some point end up with a trail through his field? At what point is it determined that a trail is going to happen? What kind of trail is it going to be? And then at that point, let's say, okay, I'm going to bring this up only because it's the only thing I can think of right now. But Maple Lane, north and south. There's some apartments going in. There's a line going through there. We're directing people onto private property. So does the city have to maintain a private parking lot? I mean, where's the ownership of the trail at that point?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll answer that question in a few ways. When private development develops and there's a line going through their property, and whether that be for a road, a path, or a trail, or a sidewalk, or a family-friendly route, whatever the various designations are, through the land use process, that property would have to build those improvements. Now, do they have to build those improvements in that exact location where that line is? No. Sometimes it makes sense to go slightly around, slightly below, or directly through, maybe in a slightly different orientation. So that's how it would likely get done. It would be super rare for something like a path to go and take land through some sort of eminent domain process to build it. If that land wants to remain a farm for the next 100 years, it's likely going to remain a farm for the next 100 years. We will likely find another way if that's the very last portion, and there would probably be a revision to the TSP at that time saying, let's find another way. So development is the way it would go. Unless it's an existing right-of-way, then we would go ahead and take care of existing right-of-way. With respect to Maple Lane, just how that played out, both projects, for those that don't know, the intersection of Maple Lane and Beaver Creek, which borders up to Highway 213, it's about 10 acres, and it's split into two developments, about half each, two different developers, and those developers had to work together, and they were both given land use conditions that built out the roads, the existing roads. Maple Lane Road has gotten wider if you've been over there recently. It's not fully usable yet, but it has gotten wider. There's going to be a roundabout that's going to be going in spring, summer of 2024 at the intersection of Walnut Grove and Maple Lane, which was required of these developments. The city's also participating in that because it's partly our responsibility as well. And so it was a great public-private partnership going on there. And then we have a new road, Walnut Grove, going through, an extension of the existing Walnut Grove going through. At the same time, Maple Lane Court was owned and maintained by the county, but it clearly doesn't function as a county road anymore. So we took jurisdiction over that so that we would be in control of that roadway. And then the last part that relates to us tonight is we have project S13, which goes through that property. And the original line on the piece of paper is not where that trail is going to end up, because it would have went right through proposed buildings, which obviously didn't make sense. But we don't make them relocate their buildings. We find a way to get the trail through in the most direct way, because we don't want someone to have to go way around, because then it defeats the purpose, but in a way that's proper and not something that hurts the development, and also is not a safety issue for them. And then ultimately, in this case, they will maintain it because it's going through their private development, and so they will have an easement over it for the public use of it, but it'll be their maintenance of it, and it'll be written in the easement document that way.
Excellent, thank you. Very, very well spoken. All right, follow-up question to that?
Well, a comment.
Okay.
You know, when I think of a park or a loop trail or any kind of a trail with bike, you think of a circle or an oval, and this sounds so disjointed, and it's very hard for me to imagine any of it on the, let's see, what side of 213 would that be on? That's not developed yet. I just can't even imagine. So, boy, your signage, I suppose we'll have a map and signage, but it sounds really complicated.
Well, so one thing that you won't see for a long time is signage. So if we ever wanted to title this the Oregon City Loop Trail, or maybe we designate it with a special name of someone important in the city, we would do that when it's all together. And I think the example I would give to that is, think of how Portland took their trail that goes along the railroad track over in Sellwood that goes up to Portland and down to Sellwood, and then it connects to the Springwater Trail, which goes all the way over to Gresham. That was not built as one thing. It used to be a big triangle, and I'm sure there's another connection up there. I don't know that part of Portland. But that was all on a big plan like this at one time, and it got implemented over time. We're just in what I would call the early phases of what Portland did in the last 100 years. We're doing it in the next 20, 30, more, yeah. As funds become available, yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Do we have any idea what gosh, I know it's a hard question. It appears to me that we've built about 20% of it right now.
I would say 10 to
Approximately.
20%, sure.
If you look at going from the area right there in Kenema by where it connects, I forget the name of the trail out there, and then all the way over to Two Rivers along McLoughlin. Just eyeballing it, it's like 20% of it is built, you could say. Do we have any idea what the rough order of magnitude cost is, like maybe on a per mile basis like if we had like this, okay, someone could write a check and pay for the whole thing today, what would that number be? Do we know?
We don't know the whole trail because we don't have jurisdiction over the whole trail right now, because some of it is outside of city limits and a large portion of it is on metro land. But we do know the projected cost of these 4 segments, and that is within the trail plan. We put that in there. We also put in where possible grants could come from. That's something we had our consultant research and help us with. And then the last thing that we did on that is, it's just on the tip of my tongue, we know the money, we know that. We reached out to Metro and said, is this even realistic to come to fruition someday? Because you've got your portion in Kenema Bluffs, you've got your portion along Newell Creek, and their response to us was, it is in our plans. It is not a project on our list at the moment that we're gonna fund in the next, budget, within their current budget. But it is in their plans, and the fact that it's in their plans is good news, meaning that when they choose to focus on those parks or the open space land that they have, they would implement.
Can you share with us what those costs are that you mentioned a minute ago?
I don't have them off the top of my head, and I did not bring that portion of the report with me.
For example, when we were working on the coordinating the trail on the Maple Lane South and North projects, we had Metro Trails planners conversations, because they want to make sure, the trails planners are looking at this area, and they wanted to make sure what that final segment looked like to Maple Lane Court, because just north of there, it starts to be their property. And there is a trail, the trail is planned on the east side of 213 along, Newell Creek as it moves up to Tamwata Middle School. So, it is on the trails planners at Metro. They are thinking and making sure that kind of the work we do fits in. But, we can only work on the projects we have control over. Right now, this project was like, okay, let's look at what we have. That doesn't stop our longer conversations with Metro and the county and looking at, once again, to get those grants again for the McLoughlin, Kenema. It's really looking at what are the next pieces. And what Josh and his team looked at was, okay, well, what's the stuff in the right of way that we can look at right now? And so that's what, kind of think of it like this piece of the project. And, I'm also the planner who just thinks, more paths that we can do inter-city, travel, and they're community paths just as much as they are loop trail paths.
Yeah, makes us a more walkable city, a better place to live, right? Could you report to the Planning Commission with the cost information later?
Commissioner Staggs, so one of the exhibits attached to your staff report, it's Exhibit 1, OC Loop Trail Refinement Plan. That's came from the consultants, it looks like, and so that has the costs in it, and I can kind of run through what's in there. So the project S22, they're estimating the total they have a number of breakdowns, so I'm going to give you the bottom line. The total long-term is 5.4 million to 8.2 million. Project S23 is estimated to be 4.8 to 7.2. Gaffney Lane Shared Use Path, S24 is estimated to be 472,000 to 708,000, which are seem very specific numbers. And then Project S30 is 56,000 to 84,000.
And which document is that in?
That is in your agenda packet. It's titled Exhibit 1 OC Loop Trail Refinement Plan Draft. And what it is a PDF of a PowerPoint. There's about 115 slides, so there's lots of information for you in there.
It also should be part of, I assume in the packet is the Oregon City Loop Trail document itself, refinement plan, and it's near the end of that refinement plan is where you'd also be able to find that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I know the answers to this, but I don't for sure. So, the Newell Creek Canyon along 213 there, does Metro own any property on the east side of 213?
Yes.
I didn't think they did. They do. Okay, so is that, wow, okay. Glad I asked. I didn't know that.
Okay, quick unrelated question about allowed uses on the trails. Does this plan define allowed uses like e-bikes? Are e-bikes allowed on these trails, or is that a different part of government? And
The TSP and the Trails Master Plan would be what designates what's allowed on various infrastructure.
okay, all right. Okay, just wondering where that fits. Okay, all right. Any other questions? Okay, normally we ask if there's any public comments on what we've discussed, or if they wanted to make any presentations from neighborhood associations, but I don't think we have anybody online.
Correct, no one is online.
Any written?
We did not
testimony?
receive any written comments.
Okay. Would you like to rebut to any of that?
I think it sounds good.
Okay, all right. Well, sometimes when we don't have any comments, that means they love what we're doing. Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff? Okay, all right. Just a second. Let me get my get my bearings. I guess the only thing I did not do earlier was give the public an opportunity to question us on our disclosures, but I don't think there were any
No, I think you're
public
okay.
members present, so we didn't
Right,
take
and
away
this is-
anybody's.
Legislative,
Okay. All right. So we just need a motion?
we need a motion, yes.
Okay. Would anybody care to make a motion?
Move to approve. GLUA 23000033, LEG 23000002.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Espy, and we have a second by Commissioner West. Can we get a vote, please?
Commissioner LaSalle,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner SB,
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye.
Thank you,
Motion
Commissioners.
passes.
Thank you. And this is tentatively going to the City Commission on January 17th.
17th?
January 17th is the tentative date
All right.
for the recommendation to the City Commission.
And did they do one or two hearings on that?
There just needs to be one hearing each.
Okay. but
It'll
that's
be a first reading and a second reading.
first reading, and then, okay. All right.
And the second reading.
Okay. Only other thing I see on our agenda is, do we need to close that record, or does that stay open?
I think that you can close it. Karen, were you
The
gonna-
record will stay open because the record will be open before the city commission.
Okay, record stays open. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, communications, the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan Project Update. I believe this is Ms.
This is
Robinson
me
Gardner.
as well.
Awesome.
This is an update to the Planning Commission of the process so far on the McLoughlin Boulevard enhancements. As we are talking more about refinement plans, it really is important to go through these process, continue refining, get them adopted, and that is how you get more grant money to continue refining your plan. Because you don't go from conceptual plan to construction drawings. There are a lot of steps in between. And so this McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan is really looking at this phase 3 of the original document that was adopted in 2004, I believe, or 3. And this section, of course, is the hardest. And really, from the original adoption, we were hearing from ODOT that replacement of the viaducts, which happened from 10th Street to about 8th Street. So just those 2 blocks are viaducts, which means that area of McLoughlin is not on full solid ground. With those viaducts not being replaced anytime soon, we need to be looking at how to provide pedestrian and bike connections in that section, as well as looking at the full design of McLoughlin Boulevard to enhance pedestrians and bikes on both sides, really from the railroad tunnel all the way around the bend on both sides of the street to 10th Street. So we call it, you can either call it Tunnel to 10th or 10th Street to Tumwater Village. The southern part of Tumwater Village, the former landfill, abuts the railroad tunnel as well. So you might hear it spoken of 2 ways, because sometimes you have to talk about things in many different ways, because some people, it resonates one way or the other. So you might hear us talk about the boundary, or we show a map of the boundary, but where we are right now, we have an open house from December 6th through 22nd. So Kay, you want to turn on the, for those who have not visited our project page, you can get access to it from the Planning Division page. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see a link that says McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancements. And on that page, you can track any meeting agenda links, any deliverable documents that come in. You can sign up to be on the project's email list. And during these 2.5 weeks from December 6th through 22nd, you can take part in our online virtual open house. So you can click on, there's a couple links on the page, but this right here is a great way to get in. And we have this open house. And what this open house does is it looks through a couple of alignments that our design team's looking at, but I really think actually what's going to be the most useful for folks is we have about 4 or 5 open-ended questions in the end, which really ask about how do you use McLoughlin Boulevard? How do you want to use McLoughlin Boulevard? Where do you want to connect to? What do you think the city should be thinking about? What are you thinking about in regards to safety, or what are you excited about? So those are that qualitative questions. I think it'd be really important for the City Commission to understand. Some options are going to be a little more straightforward, but there may be design alternatives that the City Commission are going to have to balance things. And so the more they hear from the community about their priorities, it'll be helpful for them when they are looking at design alternatives. How comfortable do you feel crossing the road? Do you want to have an alternate way to cross 99E that may be under or over? So those are some of the things that you can get into the open house. There's a great 3D rendering that shows some of the options as well as photos. So I probably think it takes about 15, 20 minutes if you want to really spend the time. And I think it'll be really invaluable for the City Commission to help understand what are the priorities of the community. This is such a big gap in our network. We connect to amenities both south and north. And then when folks get to this section, it's really unsafe and they don't want to walk, farther down to Tumwater Village or farther north up to, John Storm Park and Clackamas Park and cross to Gladstone, because it's just not feeling very safe. So what can we do to get people across the river, be connected back up to downtown in many different sections? How do we get people feel that this is a continuous connection along the Willamette River? What future amenities should the city be looking at? We're not designing it with this project, but what are your thoughts about where this would connect to? After this open house, our design team will continue to look at the design alternatives. They do an environmental and technical review, and they're concurrently working on that. And actually tomorrow, the City Commission does have a work session where they'll get an update on some of the work our design team has been doing as regards to the technical analysis and structural findings and conversations with the Army Corps and some of that technical review. And then they'll be coming back in, I think, March, late February, March, with a preferred alternative. There'll be a second virtual open house in later spring that looks at the preferred alternative. And one thing I want to remind everybody, kind of in this concept of refinement, I call this stage one of stage two. Stage one is really looking at, right now in this open house, is what's the best place for the shared use path that's bikes, bicycles, and pedestrians, kind of right along 10th through maybe 6th. How do we get pedestrians on this kind of riverside of the segment of 99E? The final design that will be adopted as a refinement to the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan and the TSP will be looking at streetscape designs on both sides from the tunnel all the way to 10th Street. But this segment right now in this open house is really concentrating on how do we navigate our way around the viaducts, navigate our way through the historic bridge. And kind of once that alternative and approach is settled, then we can kind of look at what are the additional streetscape improvements that we should be looking at to better integrate and make the 99E a safer and more exciting integrated place of our community. Thanks, Kay.
Question before you move on from that. That slide we just saw with the blue path going up and down, kind of zigzagging and then going down in the water, would that be floating, or how would it get that close to the water?
Yeah, the design is particularly vague in blue right now because we're really just looking at alignment. So what structures, is it cantilevered? Are these pilings onto bedrock? Are these pilings into the river? Those are that second phase. So there'll be some alternatives that fall out because they just won't work. And so what our design team is trying to look at is these are conceptual alignments. Let's reach out to the public, talk to the city commission, do our technical, do our cultural, do our environmental analysis. Some of the alignments are going to fall out, so we don't have to do any more work. Now, the alignments that do make it, let's do a little bit more design revisions. How would those structural supports be? So it's really had prudent use of your design contract to make sure. And so what you see right now in these kind of blue alignments is just really that. Like we're looking at rise over run, how to make grade, how did you connect up, these big picture alignments, and then further refining the alignments that can move forward.
Okay, yeah, because I think it's very important to figure out what a losing plan is early before you throw a whole bunch of money at it and then figure out, well, we just spent a lot of money and that can't happen.
Yeah, you can study projects to death and never get any design to move forward. So there's an art and skill on moving a design process forward that does enough detailed work early on to make sure alternatives are viable. But if they aren't, put them aside, move on to the next design and to put more work into that.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I felt like I cut you off and then I thought that was more.
This is just more of encourage all your friends and family to take the survey, to be on the online open house. It is open till the 22nd. You can get access. There's a link on the main page. You can go to the planning page and as well as social media. Also, one more thing, sorry. For those who are listening to the Inside City Hall podcast, Jared, our illustrious communication manager, has put together this great podcast that interviews folks for different projects in the city. And this December one actually brings John Lewis and Mark Butorek with Kittleson, our consultants, to talk a little bit of the project. So next time you're washing your dishes in your kitchen, you can click on the Inside City Hall podcast.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, Commissioner Staggs, you had a question?
Is the current effort also considering not just the alternative path of pedestrians and bicycles or whatever along the river edge, but the actual road itself and what happens on the road itself?
There is no change to vehicular lanes. We're really looking at pedestrian and bike improvements on the outside. There may be opportunities for medians in the middle, but it really depends on which segment we're talking about. Some portions of 99E don't have a lot of room to spare, some do. So our design team will look if there's any opportunities for additional, tree plantings in the interior. But I know this section is our most constrained, but they will be looking at kind of in this second phase of the design after this alignment discussion of the shared use path. We'll be looking at, are there places just outside of the tunnel, kind of that gateway feeling, how you can slow people down as they come out of the tunnel into this northbound, or then same thing as we're going southbound. What are those cues to continue to encourage people to be doing the speed limit and not use that turn as a raceway? But it's really a look at the right-of-way space we have.
The other question I had is there any, how do we see this segment and future river trail connection out to the falls? Is there any, I think I know the answer to the question. We're focused on this area here.
People have talked about it. Any open space or future Riverwalk or open space connection on the Tumwata site really starts at Water Street, which you don't see today, but is that parking lot of the former administration office of the Blue Heron that is now owned by the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. That really is the off point of where as you turn the curve in 99E, you would then, in a sense, if you're going southbound, you're walking southbound, you'd be taking a right onto Water Avenue, and that's your connection to any future open space on Tumwata Village.
Okay, I guess I'll add one more thing. As far as the path being detached from the highway, obviously that's only one of the possibilities, but is that something, are we trying our best to make it a detached path, or are we going to not push it and we're going to kind of go where reason takes us?
Well, I think the hard part is those 2 blocks where we have the viaduct, right?
Yeah.
That's the most constrained area, and that's the hardest nut to crack because you aren't going to be moving travel lanes. And the existing sidewalks are 5-foot attached non-ADA sidewalks. And I remember I was just walking there with Jared just a couple weeks ago, and I had a semi-trailer just whiz right by me, and it was so close. So there's no physical room in those 2 blocks. So that is one of those conversations of how do we get people and pedestrians and bikes through this 2-block constrained area. There are a couple more options as you go further down and you get onto the Oregon City Westland Bridge is not on a viaduct, that's on land. So it's really, how do you bring folks along the river knowing we have these constrained viaducts for those 2 blocks? And then when do you come back on land? So that's some of those questions. And how do you come back on land? Do you take over the area that's parking right now and make that pedestrian and bikes? Do you keep the parking? Do you have the pedestrian bikes next to it? Those are some of those iterations of those alternatives, but the hardest part is those 2 blocks of the viaduct because there is no space to add pedestrians or bikes on the existing right-of-way.
Okay. Yeah, for an example, if you've ever walked south of the tunnel, gone over that terrible bridge and then walked up the sidewalk along the paper mill, we should make it not feel like that.
Yeah, that's a good criteria for approval.
Because that is miserable. I mean, you've got semi-trailers 2 feet from you, and the sidewalk can't be more than 5 feet wide.
And that's a great example, and I think I'll say this forever, every time there's a public hearing as a planner, you can't build what you don't adopt. So we've been working on the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan for 20 years. We applied for grants. This is our last phase. if there are other areas that we should have future plans to address unsafe conditions, we should be doing those plans, because that's how you address and build those improvements, is you go through public process, you adopt a plan, and then you apply for grants to build segments. And so this is a great example of, we adopted it and we've been working, and that's how we're where we are now.
Yeah.
Can I just add a couple of things? I'd like to add a thought to that, because I've been thinking about this for a really long time, and that is from the falls outlook, where you can look out at the falls, and there's the little parking area where you can look down at the falls up there at the top of Highway 99 across from the pub. From there to, I don't know, I'm going to say 10th Street. It's extremely unsafe. It's horrible. And I think as a city, that stretch of property in our city is like one of the most incredible opportunities for us to do something amazing and make it people-friendly and make it a pedestrian-oriented world. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, one more thing. I keep saying I'm done, but this is a conceptual plan, and so in the realm of design, conceptual plans are still kind of in that 30 to 50% big picture, and then you get to schematic, which is a little more refined, and then you get to construction plans. So there are a lot of things that this conceptual plan will not provide the details for. Art, specific locations of art, the design of railings, these specific things, but we want to capture people's ideas and goals and the city commission goals, and then we can wrap that up as like maybe a little exhibit or a memo, and that follows us to the next level of design, where we get into that level of detail. So even though we're not picking the railings at this level, understanding your goals and your passion and your vision, we hope to capture those big picture things so we can follow it to the next stage when we get into that design.
Oh, Commissioner LaSalle.
You know, the buildings on Main Street, the back side of those, they're so ugly going down McLoughlin Boulevard. And no matter what you do, I mean, you could put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Has any thought been given to trying to beautify the backside of Main Street? And one thing that comes to my mind is planting trees now, because they take a long time to grow, but they could be kind of maybe help hide the backside of those buildings.
Some of the sidewalk on the east side is short and some of it's big. So example, the interior of the curve actually has a lot of space potentially for planting, but there are other places that there's not a lot. So adopting this plan will help us do things in segments. There are still private property, there's still some parking lots and private property, so we're not going to be planting on anybody's trees on people's private property. But I always say a perfect example, when you envision a place and move forward to build, the abutting property owners start to look at their property and say, I'm not quite keeping up there. So you often see incremental improvements when you do streetscapes improvements, because people start looking at their property. Another big goal, and we have it all in our land use documents, is to try to get new development to face 99E to the point that they can. And so that's why we actually encouraged on-street parking on the area that's already been built, because we want development right on, don't want our back to face 99E. We want our front also to face 99E. And so as developments infill in some of those parking lots, we'll be wanting the facades to face 99E. Where there's opportunities for parking, we probably want it because it's, it sets to the traveler that this is a main street just as much as our main street is. We can have two main streets in our community. So, we've really set the stage, but private development is still looking at ugly sidewalks in front of their property. So the more we can do to get that capital improvement and improve the right-of-way, I think it really does get people to start looking at their own property.
Possibly another reason to keep the urban renewal open.
Well, that's a community's policy choice.
Well, unfortunately, they brought up another idea. I feel like I've heard of cities partnering with building owners as far as beautifying or facade improvements, grants. I just feel like there's been programs. What am I thinking about?
There's been a couple. The city's urban renewal program has worked with property owners on painting. Some historic property owners work with the State Historic Preservation Office to do Diamonds in the Rough grant. Actually, the Masonic Temple building did a Diamonds in the Rough grant for painting. So there were local and statewide programs that worked at looking at that.
I was just wondering if you've got like a beautiful stretch of road, but you've got that one dilapidated building. It's as long as it's not a safety risk or a safety hazard. Are there ways to get property owners that don't want to spend any money on the property to like fix up that one last building? Does the city ever go to that step?
It's a lot easier to have carrots. And so I think for the private property owner, they'd say, okay, well, why don't you start with your first step of fixing the sidewalk in front of my property and making it nice. So, it's always easier to come to private development with, look at our project that we're working on and we're getting grants and we're going to be building. What can we do to, help you get there too? So I think having this refined plan and having a map and we can show people and everybody looks at it, it goes a long way than as something that's kind of in the back pages of a document we adopted, a couple years ago, 2003. So.
All right. Thank you.
I had one more thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Has there been any discussion about the kinds of traffic that's on Highway 99? The reason I ask that question is because I believe that one of the biggest roadblocks to that stretch of the road, of our road being a nice place to be is trucks and trailers barreling through that part of the city at high speeds with gravel flying everywhere. My office is like right on the corner of 99 and Main. So I live this every day. I see it out, like I'm sitting at my desk and I see it happening and I hear it. Semis pulling trailers with gravel, cement trucks flying through there. Has there been any discussion at I'm assuming ODOT level on restricting the kinds of traffic that can come through that?
No, 99E is a freight route, so that's not going to be changed. The Oregon Highway Commission sets that. But there are freight trucks that run through 99E, McLoughlin Boulevard and Milwaukee. They worked really hard over the last 10, 15 years to reduce speeds, provide safer crossings. When you get into downtown Milwaukee, you're in a downtown area. So, it's about design speed. It's about, providing that gateway, providing that queue of you for the next, 15 blocks, you're in downtown Oregon City trucks. And they don't have that right now, right? There's no queue for them. And so it's that design speed. It's the improvement that really queues freight vehicles. We'll still have to have the right width for freight. We have to allow freight. It's a freight corridor, but within ODOT's specs, we can tell freight, you're going to be in an urban section for these next 15 blocks.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow the speed limit.
I know we're kind of wandering way off here, but has has DODOT ever, had any kind of a plan to either turn that tunnel into 2 lanes or in 50 or 100 years replace the tunnel? Because it's almost impossible for a semi to go through there with a car next to it. So it's not really 4 lanes all the time. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2.5, you know. Has anybody ever come up with a plan to, you know, has anybody studied the area enough to figure if it's even feasible to ever fix that problem?
I can check back if I emailed you, but I am unaware of any ODOT identified plan to increase the width of that tunnel.
Yeah, because that is one of our major
Yeah.
design restrictions is just the width of the
Yeah,
land.
and
We've
that's
got,
also in coordination with the railroad. So that is a 2
Yeah.
organizations working together
there's a
to,
lot going on right there. We've got train,
Yeah.
we've got industry, we've got a river, we've got buildings. There's just only so much room. McLoughlin, they just keep taking out neighborhoods, making it wider. It's 700 feet wide now, you know. But we've got, how wide do we have? We may have 100 feet, and then we've got a cliff, and then we've got a building, and then we've got a tunnel. So it's much more difficult for us. I feel sorry for staff and everybody involved to try to make that work, but it's a valiant effort. All right. I'm done babbling. Does anybody else have anything to say? Any more comments? All right. Okay. Thank you.
all right, thank you. And encourage all your friends and family to get on the web and attend the virtual open house.
Okay. Any other communications? All right. We're adjourned.